On this episode of Real Wins, we discuss the pros and cons of a full go-to-market engagement versus an a la carte approach to creative services. Then we jump into the different types of websites in the industry: templated, hybrid, and custom. Without further ado, let's jump right in. All right, great. Mike, we're back once again. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Real Wins.
Excited to have another conversation.
We chatted a little bit before we hopped on, but tell me about the weekend. How's the family? What's new in your world out in Boston?
Yeah, so my wife had a kind of a business or an event, or not a business, sorry, a family event she had to go to for most of the day on Sunday. So I was lucky enough to be able to take the two kids, my two toddlers, 3 and almost 5, to a late lunch to a restaurant, which is always a difficult time with with my wife and myself doing it, but with 2 kids on my own at a restaurant was an interesting challenge, and they pretty much took over the place for themselves, which I'm sure all parents out there listening know how that goes. But you know, you got to roll with the punches. The kids love it; they had a blast. It was actually a lot of fun. It was a little fun daddy kids day and date, so I had a blast with it. It was really special.
That's great. Yeah, that's always challenging because you feel like when you're with your partner, your spouse, you can kind of handle it and manage it, you know, either 2-on-1 or 2-on-2 usually. I'm not even talking about the parents that are dealing with 3 or 4 kids.
The crazies. Usually you can handle it. I call them the crazies. Yeah. The crazies. You're going straight zone defense at that point. Forget about it.
Zone. Yep. Yep. Exactly. You misspoke at the top and you said business, and you said, "Oh, family." And I was going to make some joke about how sometimes family feels like business, but I didn't choose to go down that path.
Feel free. We just won't share this episode with my wife. No big deal.
Yeah, no problem. She's like, "Where's episode 5? I don't. Yeah. Where did that one?
Sorry, black hole, honey. Not going to work for you. No, all good though. No,
well, I did not have as busy of a weekend as you. My family was out of town and they're coming back. Actually, after this recording, I got to go pick them up. And so I got to do just dad stuff around the house, fix up a few things, break a few things. Cycling season has started, so nice. I'm excited to see some races. We had a really good one this weekend. They call it the Spring Classics. They're getting started. So it's like all the kind of gravelly, sloppy,
oh, wow.
rainy, mucky races. They're really fun to watch because you never know what's going to happen. So I'm excited about those. But yeah, I'm ready to jump in here. We have a couple of really good questions this week. They're questions that come up probably not as often as some of the recent ones, but definitely ones that resurface at least once a month for us at Authentic. And I think you were kind of mentioning that they come up for you as well with some of your partners, and they really relate to how to work with an agency, and I'll be more specific about that. And then also websites in general and what type of website options out there in the industry at large. So let's kick it off with the first one, which has to do with the benefits of a full engagement, a creative agency partner versus more of an a la carte approach. And I think we could tackle this a few different ways. Why don't you kick us off? I know that we have quite a few thoughts about this. So where would you begin if a client came to you and said, we want this versus that, depending on which way it goes?
Yeah. And I think we're on both sides of this in a lot of ways in terms of working with agencies like you guys, and also from clients on our on the other end saying, how do we build a program that works to go to market? And how do we do that? And so I think what we've seen a lot of times in the market is either the perception is I need to go to a bunch of different agencies or providers for different things, or I can pick sort of what I want a la carte from an agency that might offer, brand strategy and web design and digital marketing. And they might think, oh, I think it might be better just to pick a la carte. I want this for 5,000, this for 20,000, that for 6,000. So I'll match them all together, rather than taking that more holistic approach to a full, as I would call it, full, more strategic approach or engagement to the agency. But I don't know if you see the same thing.
Yeah, I always tend to ask the question, what is the project all about? Where is the project in the project lifecycle and the development lifecycle? Just to get a better understanding of what is in existence already, or maybe what just needs to be created from. Because I think I agree with what you said. There is this tendency to sort of float towards a la carte because you feel like you can kind of like pick and choose what you need with maybe one partner, go to the next partner, pick something from them, third, fourth, and down the line. And I think that's always a challenging sell. And I can't say that we work on projects like that all the time, but I understand why it is enticing from a kind of the purchasing point of view, because you kind of want to feel like you have the pick of the menu, so to speak. To me, I'll just start with full engagement. The reason why, to me, full engagement is so important is that you get project knowledge from the start. You get momentum, you get all hands on deck from a single team, and you're able to sort of work with that team from start to me, that consistency and that follow through step by step. And it's almost like overlap step by step. And it's not just like a one team stopping and the next team things up. You have this cohesion that really begins at the very beginning, and that you see that through, 8, 12, 16 months down the line. And I think that's why full engagement is preferred for us, certainly, but ideal when someone's shopping around and needing to consider these things.
Well, I think the question is, and the way I would advise people to think about it is like, what is best for the results of the project, right? And so like, okay, how does having a holistic strategic engagement for all of the aspects that you need from strategy to branding to marketing services work, and will it work better than trying to pick and choose bits and pieces of whether it's collateral, or you got a logo done by someone over here, you've got a website template done by somewhere over here, and you've got, some brochures done somewhere else, and maybe some signage done by another agency, or so you just want bits and pieces of that. And so the problem is that does very oftentimes lead to just a total dysfunctional strategy. And if the people that are listening to this and the people that see what I say a lot is, it's all about having a good, strong strategy in terms of how you're going to market effectively. And if you just are picking pieces apart and putting, tactics in search of results, or tactics in search for a strategy, that oftentimes leads to a very disjointed approach to going to market, a slow absorption, less than less than ideal demand coming in, and just poor performance overall. So that's why I highly recommend finding the right partner who can be a true partner to help you develop the entirety of the go-to-market campaigns.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that completely. And let's not throw a la carte into the gutter too hard on this podcast. But I think let's point out there, because there are situations where a la carte maybe does make sense, and it pains me a little bit to say that, but here's an example. So there are in-house teams that are really talented in-house teams that are also overwhelmed, and they can't tackle every aspect of their projects. I'm not even thinking of like smaller projects or larger projects, just like across the board, 50 unit project, 400 unit project. There are teams out there right now in 2024 who are just overwhelmed in need. And we've definitely had more than one conversation this year so far where they'll come to us and they'll say, we're swamped, we need your help with X, Y, and Z. As much as we would like it to be A through Z, these are the areas where we really need to lean on you. Would you be willing to come in and kind of help take this offer? And I think that's less of a price leader hunt and more of a, how do I find a good partner to help take this load off, and whether or not it's a good fit for our agency or any other agency they speak to. I understand that position, and I think it's something that is definitely worth looking into as well. So just to say that out loud.
Yeah, look, 100%. There are cases to be made, and there are different circumstances on every project, and frankly, every aspect of life in a lot of ways, with all different aspects of your life. But I think, the key thing is that there is a strategy, right? So whether it's been developed, by the management firm, if they have those capabilities, the in-house folks who have an in-house team and in-house agency work, or a full service agency, it's not as significant to say, or it's not as much of a problem if you have that strategy and just need to pull in some pieces from elsewhere, right? But the key thing is actually having that to begin with. And then if you need to engage extra work or extra specialties or pieces of work that are just expanding upon the strategy that you have, great. That makes total sense. And that can be very, very worthwhile. Where the problem is when you've got like a whole bunch of random tactics and random ideas coming together, and that just don't make sense and don't really resonate with the market. And that's where the problems really can kind of expand into major problems.
I wrote a note down for this conversation, and it had to do with, so my wife lived in Japan for 6 years of her life. grew up in an Air Force family and then went back after she lived there to teach English. And I call it the Missouri of Japan. She was like in the middle of nowhere, a little prefecture called Gunma for anyone listening who knows Japan. But I was thinking about this over the weekend, and it kind of is like the difference between getting that direct flight from Boston or Denver to straight to Narita, and you kind of know what you're getting into. You're with the same crew the entire time. Take off to land. There you are. You're in it together. Versus this idea of trying to figure out like what's the cheapest way I can do this. And I think I've done this in the past. I've been guilty of it. What's the cheapest way I can get to Narita? It's like, 2 stops, one in LA and then one up in San Francisco. Yeah. Why are we going to LA and then San Francisco? But, and so you get like these 3 different crews. It's disjointed. You're tired by the end for sure. And you're kind of getting to that end point much slower than you would if you had just taken the kind of like the full, arguably like just to get there, a little bit earlier. So I was kind of chuckling at myself. I don't know if that resonates at all, but it sort of came down to me of like, you just need to decide for yourself, like what's the path that you want to take it. And if you want to take more resistance, then, that's going to be your call.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's a great analogy. First off, I've got to get myself to Japan. I've never been there. So, I got to find a way to get there now more than ever. But certainly I'm taking the direct flight or as direct as possible. And I think, frankly, most of the folks who are our clients are doing the same thing, right? They want the results that are the best, not necessarily the lowest cost. Although I think oftentimes what gets lost in this real estate development shuffle, and we've talked about this before, is that it's so cost driven at times that it's hard to make a plan that is meant to drive results rather than just trying to value engineer every cost out of it. And so, we fall into that trap. We all do from time to time. But it can cause bigger problems. And, just like your example with a flight that, last thing I want to do is fly into Des Moines, then Fort Worth, and then LA, and then finally make it to Japan, probably with a stopover somewhere in the Pacific in Hawaii or something. That sounds horrible. Yep. And, I just want you to get me there on time, as reasonably quickly as possible for as, reasonable price as possible, but that delivers value. And that's a great kind of analogy to put on top of it.
With your bags too.
Listen, do not get me started on my problems with bags and airlines. Okay, please. I've had too many problems with bags.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Wins. Brought to you by Authentic, delivering premier multifamily brand experiences and smart digital marketing. Authentic's proven approach accelerates leasing velocity, boosts rental rates, and increases long-term value. You can find out more at AuthenticFF.com. And by Charlesgate, the multifamily investor's secret weapon to help underwrite, go to market, and operate projects that generate market-beating returns. With an adaptive staffing model and on-demand leasing teams, Charlesgate empowers a better resident experience at an efficient cost structure for today's owners. Visit charlesgate.com for more. Well, let's course correct now and go into our second topic of the conversation, which has to do with websites, and it relates to the first question because I think websites are commonly a piece of this larger kind of go-to-market strategy that you're referring to. And I think we kind of get this question 2 different ways. Number one is, what are the different types of websites out there? Templates, custom builds, hybrid options. And then number 2 would be, why does this website cost 10 grand, 15 grand, 20 grand versus, or maybe X number of dollars per month, depending on what type of website it is. I'll start with this one, I guess. I get this question a lot. We get this question a lot at Authentic because, well, we build websites and we have a platform called Amplify. But I think there's a misconception in the industry that ties back to this spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum, there are templated websites. We've all seen them. They all look kind of the same. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are custom websites. Usually those are typically reserved for corporate websites or larger projects that really need like a really high touch outcome to them. And there's maybe more time to actually work on them versus a property website. And then in the middle, there's hybrid website builders. And we can kind of get into each of these. There's benefits and pros and cons to each of them. Before we jump into those 3 categories, how do you see this show up for you and your clients?
Yeah. So I know you know this, but I'm the farthest thing from a web designer or a coder or anything else that has to do with like how these things are built. That said, I know what the results are that get driven by the various types of websites often, and I know what looks not so great and does not show the property in its best light, versus what does. And so that's my approach coming at this, is like, what works. And again, it's like, the templated sites typically being the least expensive and, look alike to most everything else out there. And maybe you've got an option from 6 color palettes on this templated website, and you had a logo done that, fits into this upper right hand corner, and that's what your customization is. And okay, all good, except there are a lot of problems with it that I'm sure you can dive into, and I'll let you speak to them a little bit. But what the difference is by going to this hybrid or semi-custom site that you can, component-based site that you can talk about a little bit better than I can. But certainly I think there's a lot of reaction in the market that I'm hearing, like, oh, these websites are just all the same. They're boring, from a lot of the typical template providers out there, that I think we can just do a little bit better as an industry and show our properties in a better light.
Yeah, let's jump into it. So template, hybrid, and custom. Template, I think everyone, I don't even need to hide the names of these, but you see there's platforms out there, from like the Yardies of the world, the Entradas of the world, and so forth. And they're big systems. They're working with big organizations, and they have template website builders that all look and function and feel very, very similar. The benefit to that is time and cost savings. You can stack them up really quickly. You can kind of run through them. And to your point, it's kind of like, pick some colors, throw the logo up there, build out your navigation, and you're good to go. Turn on the widgets, and we're rocking. And they're meant to be as turnkey as possible. And at the same time, though, they're the least flexible typically, and the most obviously templated, which, take that for what it's worth. Sometimes groups want that. Other times, I think, as you mentioned, there are groups that are moving away from that. The middle ground is the hybrid modular component based. That still saves time, that still saves cost, but we're able to provide custom like finishes with a set of modules that can be uniquely customized based on the property. It aligns it with the brand. It's a much nicer sort of approach to a website build, in my opinion. It is more flexible than a template, but it's not as flexible as a fully custom site. Oftentimes, you can still get that higher end look and feel with a modular site, but you're not necessarily kind of selling yourself short with what you can get from a website. I will also add that hybrid sites are usually trying to be the best of both worlds. Like, you get a little bit of the custom feel while you get a little bit of the out of the box functionality. And that's really the mindset that we built Amplify on, is that faster design and development times combined with custom touches means that you can kind of come into this system, get it done pretty quickly, and have a much higher end. That's different from the last one, or the other end of the spectrum, which is custom. Takes the longest. It costs the most, for sure. And like I mentioned, it's usually reserved for bespoke high-end properties, or really we use it most often for corporate Authentic cut our teeth in web design and development in the early days, doing big corporate websites. And that's usually where we see the corporates these days. Rarely do we see it for a property website, not only because I think it just takes too long, but I mean, we talk about budgets all the time, but usually the budgets just don't exist for a custom.
Yeah, no, I think that's why the approach you guys have designed and built with this Amplify platform is smart, because you can get that best of both worlds. You can have that custom look and feel, but without the development time, without the total fresh out of the box coding or whatever. I probably has no idea what I'm talking about right there, but yeah, but you can give that look and feel of a total custom design, but do it in a fraction of the time and a lot less cost than you could otherwise, and still have pre-built components that fit in with the industry as well, whether it's like integrations with property management software and otherwise, which is the key components. And that is one of the benefits of working with a template too. They often have these pre-built or built in pretty easily, but the fact that, because of the industry focus that you guys have and the sites you build, you have those same components built in easily, which is especially a differentiator from going and trying to work with an agency that doesn't have any multifamily or real estate industry expertise, which is frankly a pain point that we ran into a lot previously. And, there's a lot of great, fantastic agencies out there but without this deep sort of industry and technical knowledge, I think is critical to building a well-functioning website that's not just, beautiful, but actually can perform in the multifamily industry. So I think you guys did a nice job, have done and are doing a nice job of building and bridging those two worlds together, which is into a very powerful tool.
Let's wrap up this topic today, just speaking to cost, because the the spread of cost is so great between all of these different types of options. And I know that you've seen this quite a bit in working with your clients over the years as well. Just the kind of initial sticker shock or comparison shopping that happens. It's natural, I think, with websites and the way that truthfully, now that I say this out loud, I think that big website builders like GoDaddy and Squarespace over the years have really conditioned people to think that websites should be $49.99 a month kind of thing. And I think the reality is, going back to like, the value that's being driven into these property websites and the experience that comes with a team that knows the industry is quite a bit far away from Squarespace. But what do you say when someone comes to you and just asks like, well, why does it cost this? How do you approach that? And because I'm thinking there are marketing leaders that are listening that want to go more towards hybrid, but they get that question all the time and they feel like, well, I don't even know how to answer it.
Well, I think where my perspective always, really starts and ends is what is this going to do for the ultimate performance of the property, the financial results of the property, the resident experience, and what are the key things we're trying to bring to life with a property website in this particular case. And so I think in the industry, there's a lot of beautiful buildings. There's a lot of well-designed, spectacular spaces, amenities, communities, all of the things that would make a property great. However, on the face of that, and the first impression in public is this, ugly kind of window into that world. And essentially, they're trying to put a square peg in a round hole in a lot of cases with these things. And so you've got this beautifully polished, cylindrical building that you're trying to, stuff a square peg into. And it just really kind of creates a brand experience that falls apart, does not really resonate with the market in any way that's going to drive real demand to the property, which negatively affects revenue, negatively affects retention, negatively affects experience. And all of these things are what is ultimately the thing that matters. And if you just take the kind of low cost first approach, or the fastest easy button, hit the, template approach, I think you lose out on a lot of the potential return from all the things I just mentioned. And I think that's the biggest problem that I always advise and say, okay, let's look at this with the end goals in mind first, and then make the decision.
Yeah, that's great advice. Man, we kind of finished with a heater on this one today. I always look down at the clock and it's time's up already. And I feel like we could talk about this for quite a while, but for the sake of our format here and keeping it short and sweet and maybe a little bit of a hot takey, we're wrapping up here, Mike. So thanks again for another great episode, and appreciate your insights and your experience here.
Yeah, man. Great conversation.